Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility. Based on this famous definition of poetry by William Wordsworth, we imagine poets writing in moments of sudden inspiration. But what if poetry is not spontaneous at all? The process of writing poetry is often associated with emotion and intuition. However, Edgar Allan Poe presents a very different perspective. Today, I am here to discuss Edgar Allan Poe's essay, The Philosophy of Composition, where he argues that poetry is not a product of inspiration, but a result of careful and deliberate construction. Before we move into the essay in detail, I'll provide a brief introduction about the author. Edgar Allan Poe is a central figure among the dark romantics of American literature. He is known for his poems, short stories, and critical theories. He is often called the master of the macabre and is also considered the father of English detective fiction. Despite his literary success, his life was marked by personal loss and hardship which deeply influenced his writing. Now, let us take a closer look at the essay. Edgar Allan Poe's essay, The Philosophy of Composition, was first published in 1846 in Graham's American Monthly Magazine of Literature and Art. Poe called this essay his best example of critical analysis. Here, Poe elucidates how a literary work is created by taking the example of his own poem, The Raven. Poe declares that he had written The Raven with the intention of composing a poem that should suit at once the popular and the critical taste. In this essay, Poe challenges the common belief that poetry is created through inspiration or sudden emotion. He argues that writing is a deliberate and logical process. According to him, a writer must begin his work with a clear picture of the conclusion constantly in view. The plot, which is made of the incidents that would lead to this particular conclusion, can be formed afterwards. According to Poe, the first thing an author must consider is the effect of his or her literary work on its readers. He defines this effect as something which touches the heart, the intellect, and the soul. He gives much importance to originality. Edgar Allan Poe points out that poets want their poems to be considered as spontaneous compositions. Poe reveals that he had always thought that it would be very interesting if authors could give a step-by-step process by which his or her compositions are made. However, most writers are unwilling to do so. But unlike other poets, Edgar Allan Poe is ready to explain his own modus operandi by using his poem, The Raven. In his essay, The Philosophy of Composition, Poe gives attention to the following points. First, he talks about the length or the extent of the composition. Poe argues that a poem should be short enough to read in a single sitting. He says that if 2 sittings or more are required, the totality of the poem is completely destroyed. For Poe, totality or unit of effect is the most important artistic element. Edgar Allan Poe calls John Milton's Paradise Lost as a prose work. He states that brevity must be in direct ratio of the intensity of the intended effect. This statement shows the relation between the length of the poem and the intensity of the effect. When Poe proposes that 100 lines would be the proper length for a poem, his own poem, The Raven, has 108 lines. This has always been a controversy. Edgar Allan Poe considers beauty as the sole legitimate province of the poem. Here, beauty is not taken as a quality but as an effect. In his essay, Poe differentiates between beauty, truth, and passion, where truth is the satisfaction of the intellect, Passion is the excitement of the heart, and beauty is the excitement or the pleasurable elevation of the soul. Poe declares that beauty is the heart of poetry. It is the atmosphere and essence of the poem. According to Poe, the highest form of beauty is associated with sadness. For him, beauty is what excites the sensitive soul to tears. He names melancholy as the most legitimate of poetical tones. Therefore, Edgar Allan Poe chooses melancholy as the tone of his poem, The Raven, which consists of 108 lines. One of the most striking elements in The Raven is the refrain, Nevermore. A refrain is a phrase or line that is repeated at intervals within a poem, especially at the end of a stanza. For Poe, even the refrain must be brief. Therefore, he decided it must be a single word. In order to give more emphasis to the refrain, Poe decided to pick the sonorous word nevermore. He carefully selected the word nevermore for its sound, the long O and the strong R. He believed that sound plays a crucial role in creating emotion. The repetition of nevermore creates a haunting, echo-like effect that reinforces the theme of loss. Poe decided that a non-reasoning creature would be best suited for this role. Initially, he thought of a parrot, but quickly he discarded the idea, as the raven, a bird associated with dark, mythological and somber themes, was better suited to create the desired macabre and melancholic mood. Poe states that the death of a beautiful woman was the most poetic topic in the world, and the most suited lips for it were those of a bereaved lover. The lover lamenting the death of his deceased mistress, and the raven repeating the word nevermore. These two ideas were juxtaposed by Poe in his essay, The Philosophy of Composition, and his poem, The Raven. Here it appears as if the raven was answering the queries of the lover. Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven uses a driving, hypnotic rhythm built on trochaic octameter, 8 stressed, unstressed feet per line, combined with a strict ABC-BBB rhyme scheme. Poe describes this combination as a novel one. The alliteration such as weak and wary, rare and radiant, and flirt and flutter also helps to bring novelty to the poem. Edgar Allan Poe then talks about the construction of his poem, The Raven. He explains how he builds the poem step by step. He carefully chooses a closed chamber as the setting where the meeting between the lover and the raven takes place. He then introduces the raven through the window. When the speaker opens the window to find darkness, it leaves space for implying that he had hoped that it would be the spirit of his lover knocking on the window. Poe's choice of a tempestuous night creates a mysterious atmosphere. The conversation between the lover and the raven gradually increases emotional intensity. Nothing is accidental, everything is planned. The raven only knows a single word, that is, nevermore. However, because of the human thirst for self-torture and superstition, the lover continues to ask questions which would cause him the maximum pain. Some critics have stated that Poe used autobiographical elements in his poem, indicating the repeated loss of women in his life, including those of his mother, Eliza Poe, his foster mother, Frances Allen, and his wife, Virginia. However, the final lines of the poem, The Raven, and the raven never flitting, still is sitting, on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight over him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor be lifted nevermore, makes the bird, the raven, even more emblematic of mournful and never-ending remembrance. It becomes a symbol of unending memory, grief, and psychological torment. And this is exactly what Edgar Allan Poe demonstrates in his essay, The Philosophy of Composition. Every element in a poem is carefully designed to create a single, powerful emotional effect. The poem does not simply express emotion, it constructs it. And so, as readers, we are left to ask, are we feeling the poem or is the poem making us feel? Thank you.